Hey, Pellegrino, hey, thanks a lot for doing this, taking the
And that's
time.
what the first question I do have is, since you are going on tour, book tour, you're traveling all over. Did you see that? Did you see yourself doing that when you first started the whole
No,
podcast? Being this worldwide traveler, and hey, the world coming to see you.
no, Jeff, and I'm not a good traveler, so I'm not great at getting on planes and going through airports. I'm an anxious person anyway, but particularly around travel. And so I have just been wrapping up this book tour, and it's been so great to meet everyone. But I could have never imagined. I used to do stand up and sketch comedy around in Chicago and then Los Angeles when I moved here to California. And I was often doing shows for where there would be more people on stage or there'd be three people in the audience. And so then I started my podcast, and the podcast snowballed in a way that I couldn't have expected, and then led me to performing again on stage for people. And I just got off this tour, and there were sold out crowds across the country. And it was just incredible, but also not something I could have ever anticipated when I was doing those sketch shows or improv shows for such small crowds of people.
So what was it? What was it like doing improv for 5 people or 6 people or however?
It was challenging. I remember oftentimes I would be going on at 11:30 at night or midnight, or I would do stand-up shows where I'd be the 15th comedian on the lineup. And so when you're the 15th comedian of the night, the audience is drained. They don't care about your 5 minutes. They want to get out of there. They've had enough. And so yeah, it's much more fun to get on stage with an audience full of people who at least kind of are familiar with your work or your sensibilities. So it's been fun.
But with that, how when it was the early days and you did have a few people, how do you keep the mindset to say, you know what, it's going to get better next year, maybe a year from now, 10 years from now, I'm going to be filling crowds up, or it's going to be a lot better than this, instead of just saying, you know what, is it worth it, or can I just have fun with it?
I think the naivety of youth, right? Like you just in your 20s, you just do those things and you're not really thinking of anything else. You're just thinking of, I got to put one foot in front of the other. I have this dream. I want to keep going. I want to push as far as I can. And so I just tried to hold on to that little voice inside, even at times when it felt like I shouldn't be doing this. And actually, I had a moment before I started my podcast where I had fallen into a very bad place with my own mental health. And I had said to some friends and family that I would never perform again. I thought I was done. That was it for me. A friend actually recommended that I start a podcast because she said you could perform from the privacy of your house. You don't have to leave. You don't have to go to a show. You don't have to be on a stage in front of people. And so I started a podcast, and then oddly enough, that led to this performing again for people. But there was a time where I thought I was never going to perform again because I had just gotten in a pretty dark place in my own life.
How, I mean, how can you tell me just a little bit through that? Just to say where, I mean,
Yeah,
going through a dark time, you don't want to do anything, you don't want to perform, and how, like, how, what were the steps to finally getting you?
yeah. There was a sort of a handful of events. I had a grandparent who I was very close with pass away. I had some career setbacks. It was a whole slew of things that put me into a pretty deep depression where I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to leave the house. I had trouble even just getting up to take a shower. It was a pretty rough month. And I talk a little bit about it in my first book, but I remember a turning point. I was going to an amusement park with my boyfriend and looking out the window, and I was having these I was just in the darkest place in my life, and I didn't know that I would come out of it. And I slowly started to do all those things that they tell you to do, like uh, journaling and meditating and exercising and all of those little things that they say to do to get your mental health in order. And so I slowly got myself out of that depression, but it took some time. I had my experience, which I know everybody's is different. My experience was like one really bad month, and then dealing with the residual side effects of that month. But I had a month where I just struggled to even get to the
How did that
shower.
help you out? How did going to the gym, working out, just ease some of that stress inside of you?
Yeah, I started to go to a facility that did those HIT workouts, or is that what they're called? The HI, it's
Yeah, like a boutique
yeah,
studio type.
yeah. So I went to a boutique studio and I started to do a routine of fitness. So I was going every single day and taking a class, and that was actually very helpful because I met a lot of close friends at that class because I was going to the same time every day. And it was also a very challenging workout. And so getting that sweat in and getting all of the endorphins flowing was super important to me. And then oddly enough, it also led to a writing career because I was taking classes with a guy named Bob Harper, who was a trainer on The Biggest Loser on NBC and later a host of that show. But him and I became very good friends, and I ended up co-authoring his last book, which was called The Super Carb Diet. And so it sort of led me into the publishing world. And then I ghost wrote a couple books in the publishing world. And then that led to me being able to do my own book, which came out last year. And then now The Jolliest Bunch, which just came out.
Tell me a little more about The Jolliest Bunch. It's a Christmas book, right?
Yeah, it's a collection of Christmas stories. I like to think of it as National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation or a Christmas story in book form. Each chapter is its own little tale. It's a lot of stories about chaotic family gatherings and growing up in the Midwest. There's tons of pop culture and nostalgia throughout it. But yeah, I really wanted to feel like those classic chaotic Christmas movies that I've always loved, the Home Alones, the Christmas Vacations. I think around the holiday season, we all have our chaotic family stories, and truth is always stranger than fiction. And what's been so fascinating is meeting so many people who have now read the book and hearing their own stories about a crazy Thanksgiving dinner that they had with their family. I just was talking to someone who was telling me that they had a Thanksgiving dinner that went so off the rails that the head of the household, this dad, ended up taking the turkey and throwing it across the table. And so I think everyone has these chaotic holiday stories. And so it was so fun to put them in book form and hopefully give people something that they can escape to around the holiday seasons, laugh. And there's also some warmth, a little bit of drama, but most importantly, I wanted people to pick this book up and have some laughs and escape for the holidays.
I don't think anybody ever threw food in my house, but did you have that? Did you have that moment, or did people?
No, we did.
Sort of things.
We didn't have food, but we certainly had all sorts of there's one story I tell about a Thanksgiving where I went to a friend's house, and the woman of the house, who was really doing everything in terms of getting the dinner together, she had a feud with the neighbor next door, and the neighbor next door had one of those inflatable Thanksgiving turkeys, those big kitschy ones that they sell at Target and Walmart. And so by the end of it, it saw the woman going to the next door neighbors with a knife and slashing that big decorative balloon that they had in their front yard. So, I mean, I feel like I've seen it all.
So do you look forward to holidays to spending time with family or for content at this point?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both. I think mostly I love spending time with my family, of course, but I think I'm just an observant person, so I like just looking around and seeing what's going on. And I really think if anyone out there were to really just observe what's going on around them around the holiday seasons, they will have a million of these types of stories, because there's so much emotion and energy around the holidays and making things perfect and trying to make things perfect. And inevitably, when you're trying so hard to make something turn out great, it falls apart. And so the threads just keep getting looser and looser. And so yeah, I think everybody gets a little nuts around the holidays.
Well, like, what year of your life or of your family, your holidays, did you start thinking, you know what, I could write a book about our family? Like, did you know the time during each Christmas? Did you know, oh, this is great, this is chapter 1, this is chapter 2, or was there one time where it said, hey, I got a book?
I think I realized early on when I was doing my podcast, I was covering reality TV, or I interview celebrities on my podcast. And oftentimes in between all of that stuff, I would tell a story about a chaotic family gathering or something to do with my parents. And I noticed when I first started going on tour with my podcast, people were coming up to me at those shows or even DMing me on social media and telling me how much they love the story about my mom's woodpecker that I told on the show, or some of these things that I thought were comical, but I was finding that everybody was relating to my parents and my 2 older brothers. And so that was when I started to have the idea that these stories were relatable and universal and that people might like them. And so it was always my hope to be able to do my version of like a David Sedaris book to tell these family stories. And then the first one came out and I was overwhelmed with the response from people who related to those stories. And so continuing it into this book, The Jolliest Bunch, it just felt like a natural progression to tell the holiday version of these stories.
When it comes to holidays, I mean, are you able to just like overdo it, but at the same time stick to a regimen of working out? And
I think it's important for all of us to do our best, right? Like it's impossible. At this time of year, there's so many snacks and everything coming at you. I love the pumpkin flavored everything. I love all the snack companies that also come out with their peppermint version of stuff. I'm a huge fan of all that stuff, and I am not good at resisting any of it. So I do take all of that in, and I tend to snack on all of those wonderful sweets this time of year. But then I also try to find the balance of having time for exercise. I'm more of someone who needs to exercise for their mental health. And so I currently have been doing the Barry's Bootcamp workout classes. Those are really great for me because I feel like I need to be pushed super hard so that I have those endorphins flowing afterwards, and that I love feeling that heavy sweat after a workout. So yeah, I try to do as best I can, but I mean, inevitably at the top of the year, we're all looking around and thinking, get these sweets out of the house, or, I need to add something to my workout regimen. So I do my best, but I'm a work in progress in that way.
Is it hard to do it on the road, traveling?
Yeah, it's definitely hard to do it on the road. I just came off of 3 weeks of not being home, and I think that is really hard to get any sort of diet or exercise routine when you're living off of hotel food. And I felt like there's always chicken fingers that are they only have chicken fingers. It's hard to get like good, healthy foods. And so that's hard, but I always try to find time in whatever city I'm in to go out exploring and walking. That's what I try to do most, is just to walk and explore. So if I'm in a city where it's walkable, I was just in Chicago, and it's so fun to be able to walk around in that city and see places. I lived there for a little while, and see places that I used to visit, and I try to exercise that way. And if I can make it to like a workout class in some city, I definitely do that as well. I always have packable workout clothes with me. So I love also wearing I think it's called Allbirds. Those are the shoes I wear because you can wear them on a plane, but then you can also work out in them. So yeah, I do my best. I do my best.
But what are your three best cities for walking, for working out?
Chicago, New York, and then I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and so being there, I'm able to visit places that I used to work out at, or the family places, or there's so many places that I know where to walk there, where to exercise, or different gyms. So I'd say those are the three easiest places. And New York is such a walkable city too. I don't even think you have to make it to workout class when you're in New York, because you're just walking everywhere. And I love that. The one thing I wish about LA was that it was more of a walkable city.
Is that where you're from right now, LA?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles now. Yeah.
And the question I wanted to ask is about your podcast. And if I'm not mistaken, it all started off about reality TV. It all started about what am I missing about Real Housewives? I've never watched one episode. What is it that I should be
Jeff,
binging on these for?
Of course, everybody watches The Real Housewives for the drama and the headlines that we see in the news. But what I really love about the Real Housewives franchise is that we're seeing women in ways that we're not seeing in the scripted world. So we're seeing women over 40 start businesses, go through divorces, raise their children, say goodbye to their children as their kids go off to college or adulthood. We see them dating. We see their sex lives play out on the show. So we get to see these women in three-dimensional ways. And of course, the headlines are always going to be about those big fights that happen on the show. But I also think there's something really beautiful that happens in between those moments on the show. So I love all of it. And I think there's a lot of humor to be found too. I think if you watch the shows and just watch them for the chaos and there's so many moments that will really make you laugh if you start watching them and recognizing the tropes of those shows. And sometimes the fights can be really big, and then sometimes they could be really petty about a seating arrangement at a dinner party or something very minuscule. And I find those moments to be hilarious. So I think there's a lot to love. And then of course there's fashions to look at, and a great, all that kind of bells and whistles as well.
Now, did you think that that's something that you could have made a living off of? Just your love for that, turning it into what it is right now?
No, it's been amazing. I always just was such a huge fan of these shows. And so I never thought that I would be able to turn that into something, but it's been amazing. And I'm so grateful to Bravo and specifically, but also all of the people who listen to my podcast. And I find that I have a lot of listeners who we all get the same things. We get the same reference points. And so it's been really fun to connect with people who get and like the same things that I do.
Well, how has it evolved? How has your just your performance evolved from the day one, that first interview, that first podcast? Do you look back at it and say, well, that was really, really good? Or do you look back and cringe a little bit? And just how it evolved from there into something to like booming right now?
Yeah, those first episodes were cringe, but I was finding my way and I was finding my footing. And I think the core of what those first few episodes were still the same. I was still mixing celebrity interviews with reality TV recaps. At the beginning, it was really because I didn't have access to anyone to interview. So that was why I started to really recap the reality TV shows, because I didn't know how to book a guest. And then as it evolved, I continued to do those reality TV recaps. And it's been great to have access then to people that I would have never thought I would be able to talk to as the show has done better and better. So now instead of reaching out to celebrities in their DMs, people reach out to me and say, we'd love to have you on, or we'd love to have our client on, or we'd love to come on. And so that's been really fun, that shift. But I think the core of what I did was always the same. It was just kind of learning my way, learning the technology of it all. And I still am a self-produced show. So I think I still hold on to that. And it's been very important to me to continue to do that, because I think that's the appeal for the audience, is that I'm doing the show the exact way I want to. I do have a company that does my ad sales, but other than that, I'm still editing, I'm still booking, I'm still literally doing everything. I'm a one-man band at the show. So it gets to still be me completely. And I feel very proud of that.
How much sleep do you get if you're the one-man show still?
I'm very tired, Jeff, especially after these past few weeks. But I have it down. I've been doing it so long now. It's like the editing process is quicker than it used to be. But I just learning my way over the years.
How important is it though for the next person who wants to follow in your footsteps to find that niche that you may not even thought existed or could amount to anything, and just keep sticking with it until it does evolve into something really magical, something really brilliant?
Well, it's so important to be consistent. So if anyone asks, I always say, if you're starting a podcast and you, excuse me, want it to be a weekly show, then you do have to be consistently a weekly show. I mean, it was about 5 years into my podcast before I even had a week off where I didn't release a podcast, because I knew that consistency was key. I had heard a friend told me that people want to make your show part of their routine, but you have to make it easy for them. And so you can't just, if you're saying you're going to be a once a month show, you can't just take 2 months off, especially in the beginning. You have to make it easy for people to be making you part of their routine. And so I always thought that was good advice. And then also trusting your gut and doing the show that you want to do. I mentioned connecting with my audience and that how we tend to have the same reference points and stuff. I think oftentimes when people are starting, whether it be podcasts or TV shows or whatever, I think you can fall into the trap of trying to be like someone else's show, or trying to be like another host that you see that does well. And I don't think it ever works. I think you have to really do the thing that makes you you, and follow your own gut, because otherwise you're just doing a poor impression of somebody else. And the audience is smart enough that they can smell through the bullshit. So you can't fool anyone. And so don't just start a podcast and make it exactly like somebody else's. Just at least try to make it yours, do your version of whatever it is.
Now, is it important to work through the rough moments? Like those early times where you really don't know what you're doing, and just, you know what, throw it up there, whatever happens, happens. And the next one will get better. The next one will get better, as opposed to say, I'm going to wait and just make the most brilliant first one ever. And 3 years later, you're still working on it.
No, it'll never be perfect. So I think you do have to just keep on going, keep on doing it, put it out there. You're learning. There's a learning curve to all of it. And so you just have to keep on doing it, and don't be too caught up in whether something is perfect. And if you're putting out something, you're do the best you can. Obviously you don't want to put out something that's a complete garbage in that way, whether it be like technology wise, but otherwise I think it's trial and error too. And you have to put out your work, and you have to let it be judged by people. And that's going to be a learning process for you as the creator, because you're going to find out what people respond to, what they like. And so you can't be too precious about it. The only thing I'd say is, in terms of getting something perfect before you launch, is to make sure that it's at least technology wise listenable and those kinds of things. You know, those specifics are, I'd say, the most important. But in terms of like finding your own voice and stuff, that's going to be some trial and error, and that's going to be by putting it out there into the world.
I mean, was there one breakthrough moment for you that you remember that, oh, this really, now I feel like I've taken off or I've now succeeded? Was there one interview, just one
Yeah,
moment, one, I guess, maybe good feedback that said,
yeah, there were certain interviews that I did with people. A woman named Bonnie Hunt, who I worship and adore. She's an actress, and she that was really a turning point for me because she came on my show sort of early, and I love her so much. And it was an interview that I really wanted to do. And I think there have been a handful of those interviews that I did because I love the person. And I think the love translates to the listeners. So even more recently, I had a guy named R.L. Stine on my show, and he wrote those Goosebumps books. So he's a hugely successful author. And I was so excited to talk to him. And it might not necessarily be what all the listeners are coming to my show for. Oftentimes, I think listeners come for the reality TV stuff or the interview was with Real Housewives. But I always find it so gratifying when one of those other interviews move people. And I think the only time they do move people or people respond well to them are when my heart's in it. And so I think that translates hopefully in my show is people can come to it and maybe listen to an interview with someone they might not have expected to like. And I love when I hear from people who say they weren't sure if they should listen to it and then they listened to it and loved it. So I think the Bonnie Hunt interview was a turning point in that way of being like, okay, I trusted my gut and a lot of people responded well to it. Or there's a woman named Beverly D'Angelo, who's an actor that I had a similar experience early on where I had the greatest conversation with her and then listeners listened and liked it.
how then does Danny Pellegrino unwind? When this is all done, when this interview is done, when your interviews are done, and stress is done, the interview's posted, it's up, everyone loves it, some may not, or whatever, you may get those 1 or 2 comments, but how do you just unwind and say, okay, let me take
I
a breath,
like
exhale, and then start over again?
I try to just I love watching TV. I love movies. I love vegetating on the couch. I love video games. I'm a huge Nintendo junkie, so I'm so excited. These past few weeks have been really chaotic, but I have a new Super Mario Wonder game to play on my Switch that I'm so excited to just shut off the world and play the new Mario video game. Like that to me is heaven. So that's like waiting for me at the end of this week, and I can't wait. But
How
also, I mean, working out too is great. That helps me so much. I mean, that keeps me sort of grounded all the time. But yeah,
what's your workout schedule like? How many days a week do you do it?
normally when I'm not on tour, I tend to do about 5 days a week, whether it be going to the gym. I have a gym membership to a place I can actually walk to from my house, which is great. And then I do those berries classes about 3 times a week or 2 to 3 times a week, depending on the week. But I do have a consistent I tend to go every Sunday to Barry's. I have a group of friends that I go there with. My buddy Nick and I go, and that I think it's great with workouts to, if you have friends that you could do workouts with, whenever somebody asks me to hang out or catch up, I try to center it around a hike or Los Angeles has all these great hiking trails. And I know it's cliche and some people are probably rolling their eyes about this, but I do love to, if I can, schedule that hang or that catch up around a walk or a hike, because then I can get the workout in, I can hang out with a friend, and I love looking at the views too.
I'm just getting to that. I'm in Phoenix now, so I'm just getting used to the whole hiking experience. And it's
Where are you from?
originally from New York, actually originally from Pennsylvania, New York, now Phoenix.
Okay.
So
Yeah, it makes a big difference when you live somewhere. Again, I'm from the Midwest and you can't really hike during the winter time, or you can't exercise outside too much when it gets really cold. But here in Los Angeles, you can hike year round and there's so many trails here.
But when it comes to working out, when it comes to doing your hiking, how important is it to have that little support team with you, your friends to do it with you instead of just going at it alone?
Oh, it's so important to have people to push you. It'll make your workouts better because they'll push you. There's even a little bit of a competitive aspect, I think, when you're working out with a friend, even if it's playful in nature. I think you're looking at them and you're thinking, I want to do more, whatever, then I want to lift a little heavier. I want to do more sit-ups or whatever it is, especially in those classes, in the class atmosphere. I think you're constantly looking, and when you're with friends, you're just naturally, I think, going to get a little competitive. And so it does make your workouts better. But yeah, I think it becomes a social aspect too. And that's a great thing.
So what's the best trail in Los Angeles or in the California area? to go?
Oh, lately I love the Fryman Canyon hiking trail, but of course Runyon Canyon is the one that everybody knows and loves. But really anywhere, those are the two that I probably frequent the most. But yeah. Fryman lately.
So when you're home, also, what's your like nutrition like? What is your, if you're not in the chicken tenders of every hotel room, what's your refrigerator look like?
You know, it's all over the place. Right now I'm in a healthy mode, so I tend to have a lot of like lean turkey, lean meats, fruits and vegetables. So I'm always working on finding the balance. Lately, I feel like I've found like a really good balance and being strict enough without being too restrictive. Does that make sense?
Kind of, yes.
Okay.
Specifics. What's in the refrigerator?
Oh, sorry. I lean turkey breasts. I eat a lot of, I love a romaine lettuce salad health wise. And then I do have a sweet tooth. So I love cookies. I try to any sweets wise, I tried to make homemade stuff. So I do like making cookies or lately I've been making a lot of like pumpkin breads and seasonal baked goods, but I try my best when it comes to the sweets to at least make them as homemade as possible.
And when it comes to talking on book tours, what are your book tours like? What does go on?
The book tour is interesting. It's sort of a mix of a live podcast show mixed with the little book stuff and stand-up comedy. And so it becomes this almost a little bit like a variety hour. We open the shows with a 15-minute video that's a collection of what I call iconic clips from pop culture. And so it's reality TV and it's 90s movies and it's just clips of everything. And the audience goes wild for it. And then I come out, I do a little stand up, and then I cover whatever is going on in the world of reality TV. So it's an interesting mix of all the things that I think people might come to my podcast for. And it's fun. We do a little Q&A at the end. And I try to tell stories at the live shows that I don't tell on my podcast, certain guest stories or things that I could get a little messier at a live show.
Mm-hmm. So for those who haven't watched your podcast, what should they expect?
On my podcast, Everything Iconic, is about 80% reality TV recaps. So I cover all of the Bravo shows. So The Real Housewives, I talk about Vanderpump Rules, those shows, and then 20% celebrity interviews. So I've had people like Kelly Ripa, Drew Barrymore, Andy Cohen. I interviewed Miss Piggy last year. I've run the gamut of really amazing guests. So it's 80% reality TV, 20% celebrity interview.
Through it all, what was the best piece of advice that you did get? As far as doing this,
the consistency was advice that I got, was that thing I mentioned about staying consistent with whatever you do. And even if that's on social media, if you're someone who posts memes or whatever it is that you're doing and putting your art into the world, I think just making it easiest on the audience to be able to get your stuff and to access your stuff. And sometimes you do have to be annoying in promoting it or posting about it. It feels a little unnatural to constantly be telling someone to pick up your book or to follow your Instagram page or whatever it is, or listen to your podcast. But I think you do have to do that. And you just have to kind of push down that uncomfortable cringe feeling that you have when you're trying to get people to access your art, because ultimately you do want people to access it and read it or whatever.
Do you still have those moments, or did you ever have those moments of just,
yeah,
not satisfied?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's always that feeling of feeling gross to promote it. And then you look at something after you finish it and you're like wondering, is it good? Is it not good? And sometimes it takes some time. My new book's been out for a week and it's been so nice because I've been finally hearing from people who've read it, and it's gratifying because it's natural to second guess yourself. And so it feels really good to then hear people embracing it.